Welcome, everyone. I'm Dov Waxman, the director of the UCLA Younes Nazarian Center for Israel Studies and the Rosalinde and Arthur Gilbert Foundation Chair of Israel Studies at UCLA. Today's lecture is the final one in a three-part series that's featuring distinguished Israeli scholars discussing the past, present, and future of democracy in Israel. The first lecture in the series was given by Shlomo Rabineri on the historical roots of Israeli democracy. The second lecture was by Eva Iluz on the subject of populism and populist politics in Israel. And this final lecture by Yael Tamir is on the subject of identity politics in Israel and the US. All three lectures will be available to watch on the website of the Nazarian Center, as well as on our YouTube page. I'll now turn over to my colleague and the co-sponsor of this series, Professor David Myers, who holds the Sady and Ludwig Kahn Chair in Jewish History at UCLA. I'd like to thank David and the UCLA Department of History for co-sponsoring this lecture.
Thank you very much, Dov. It's a real pleasure and privilege to welcome Professor Yael Tamir to UCLA and the Nazarian Center, especially at this moment of great challenge and perhaps opportunity in the history of nationalism, democracy, and the State of Israel. When Dov and I thought about a series on democracy in Israel, we immediately conjured up the name of Professor Tamir as a desired speaker because she's one of Israel's most distinguished political theorists and really one of the world's leading thinkers on the intersection of liberalism and nationalism. That would have been sufficient reason to have invited her, but her career has moved well beyond the bounds of the typical academic in the ivory tower. She has also been a political activist who was among the founders of Shalom Achshav, Peace Now, and she chaired the Association for Civil Rights in Israel. This activism led to her entry into politics, where she characteristically distinguished herself, serving as a member of Knesset for the Labor Party and as a minister on 3 occasions of immigrant absorption, science, culture, and sports, and most significantly from 2006 to 2009, Minister of Education. In 2010, she embarked on a new career when she accepted the position of president of the Shenkar College of Engineering and Design, where she served for 10 years until 2020, when she became the president of Beit Beryl College. Now, we could perhaps discuss with her some of the challenges of being an administrator in higher education at this particular juncture in history, but we would be missing an opportunity if we did not draw on Professor Tamir's expertise as a political theorist in understanding our tumultuous world. We have been passing through a most difficult phase in modern history, one marked by the reign of what has been called illiberal democracy, a doctrine that accentuates the most exclusionary strains of ethnocentric nationalism. We've seen it in Orban's Hungary, in Erdogan's Turkey, in Trump's America, and in Netanyahu's Israel, among other sites. And it raises a question. Is nationalism fated to follow this exclusionary and ethnocentric path? Already in 1993, Yael Tamir answered no. In the wake of her illustrious mentor at Oxford, Sir Isaiah Berlin, she published a book called Liberal Nationalism, in which she argued that liberalism and nationalism are not, as some tend to think, diametrically opposed, but rather can be compatible partners in ordering the world. 26 years later, in 2019, she published an updated version of this claim in Why Nationalism, in which she argued again that liberal nationalism remained a viable alternative not only to ethnocentric versions of nationalism, but to a boundary-churning globalization that set in motion exclusionary ethnocentric reactions. Now, one might agree or not with her optimism about the ongoing possibilities for liberal nationalism, but one must reckon with Yael Tamir's deeply considered views. This is especially true now, and especially for Israel, after the terrible violence of May, and now after the seating of a new government headed by someone other than Bibi Netanyahu. What are the prospects for liberal nationalism in a post-Bibi Israel? What are the prospects for liberal nationalism in a post-Trump US? And what are the prospects for liberalism in general in the age of wokeness? These are some of the questions that will no doubt arise in Professor Tamir's talk on identity politics in Israel and the US. And so, without further ado, I'm delighted to hand the virtual podium over to Professor Yael Tamir.
Thank you, David. It's an honor to be here today. And how lucky we are that we had to postpone the lecture in 2 weeks, because if I would have given this talk about 2 weeks ago, I would be quite desperate, and now I'm quite optimistic. So that tells you that, like everybody else, political theorists cannot predict the future. And they're most likely not to really evaluate rightly future developments. So I would say that, in the last 3 days, it's a very short period, the question of whether Israel can go in a different direction receives a new answer. And there is a bit of optimism sneaking in. And it is because this coalition, this government, is the most unlikely coalition one could think of. It really is across the aisle. There are lefties and right-wing politicians. There is an economic left and an economic right. There is a prime minister for the first time who's a religious Jew, who is an Orthodox Jew that sits with people like Lieberman, who flies the flag of anti-orthodoxy, and they're all sitting together in the same government with a member of the head of an Arab party who is not considered neither Zionist nor a supporter of many of the basic ideas of the Jewish state. And they're all sitting together, and it tells you that in times of crisis, and I think Bibi led Israel to a deep crisis, an identity crisis. Israelis looked at themselves and said, this is not us. And this is a very rare, I think, I don't know, a theoretical or a political precedent for this kind of a collaboration, where people just, in order to change the government, and it's not only about Bibi, it's saying if you've been in power for 12 years, power corrupts, and it indeed corrupted Bibi and his surroundings. So let's change the government. This is the only basis of agreement in this very awkward coalition. But once they were seated together around the table, they started discovering that there are other things that they can agree about. There is the post-corona victims that you have to help, whether economically, educationally, mentally, medically. There is a crisis of employment. There is a crisis of education. Those are major things that people care about. And this government, because it cannot deal with foreign policy, because there's no agreement on foreign policy and there is no agreement on the Palestinian issue, may be the first government that actually looks inwardly in order to solve Israel's social economic problems. And these are many. So it's a circumstantial situation. I wouldn't say that there is sort of an involvement of a social sort of movement to overcome differences. But as we all know, when something happens, people can imagine it could have happened. This seems like an irony, right? It already happened, so obviously it could have happened. But what seemed totally unrealistic 3 weeks ago is now a fact. And being a fact, it changes the way people perceive themselves, Israeli democracy, Israeli identity, and what could happen within within the boundaries of the 67 borders. As I said, there is no agreement about what happens in territories. And I guess this government, if it wants to survive, it would do nothing significant in the territories. So we are now witnessing an attempt to break identity lines, because like in the United States, where hostility and polarization between Democrats and Republicans was at its peak before the Biden election, so was the case in Israel. And it was very interesting how Bibi used this hostility in order to label, let's say, Bennett, who is for me a right-wing religious person, as a lefty. So the left has been expanded, in a sense, ironically, by Bibi labeling everyone who's not for him as a lefty. So now people are confused. They are honestly confused about who they are, because there are lots of people from the center and center-right who support this government, and they ask themselves how to identify themselves and who are they likely to affiliate with. In this respect, the entrance of Mansour Abbas into the government, who is the least likely person to join a Zionist government, because everybody thought that it would be Ayman Udeh, who was a liberal, progressive Arab, and here comes a religious Muslim Arab who actually says, when I wanted to join the government, I went to the Sharia law and I asked the elders of the Sharia council to give me permission. For an Israeli ear 2 weeks ago, that would be unacceptable. Now everybody applauds. People say, wow, that's great. We can find a common denominator that will take us forward. I don't think the situation is as dramatic in the United States. I think, and also one should say, what is happening now in Israel could be rather superficial. It will need more time in order to sink in as a new reality. But once it happened, once there is this kind of bonding, I think it is more likely to persist, or another coalition could emerge where the taboo of joining forces between right and left, Jews and Arabs, Zionist and non-Zionist, has been broken. Once it is broken, it could be redone. This is because we are a country, a democracy based on proportional representation that needs a coalition. Imagine that we were, like America, a bipartisan system. There would never be a coalition like this, because it would be not possible by the political structure of the country. So for many years, Israelis thought that polarization is actually a result of proportional representation, because very small and extreme parties can play the political game and gain a seat in the parliament. This time it worked for us. Something that is much more difficult to create in a system like the American systems, or in other systems where it's winner takes all. So we are now in a position to ask ourselves whether Israel couldn't. I don't know how long this government will survive. Nobody knows. Maybe the difference will keep it together. Maybe the difference will draw it apart. But are we able to redefine what the state has to do? Because it's not only about democracy, it's about the role of the state in this time and age. And here something very interesting happens, and not only in Israel, but also in the United States, and I think all over the world. The fact that the corona created tremendous vulnerabilities all over the countries, all over the globe, created a situation that called the state back in. The state that was pushed aside by neoliberal views, by globalization, by international organization, is now coming back as a player, because there is no health if there is no public health service, there is no education if you don't have a public system, and there's no transportation or other main sort of civic services unless the state intervenes. This wasn't the ruling opinion until recently. The corona made it very clear. there are moments where states have to be activated. And they activated themselves very quickly, by the way, pouring money in, something that was not the, let's say, the attitude to the 2008 crisis, pouring money to individuals, not to banks or global mega companies. And states started to take upon themselves the real role of social democracies. Even states that would not define themselves that way found themselves playing the state of service providers during the corona and certainly in the post-corona era. At the end of the day, also people who were very critical of state activism now understand that there is a limit to what individuals can do on their own. And globalism cannot solve a lot of the problems that we are facing in the 21st century. Hence, I think what we are witnessing is the development of a very interesting set of ideas that now collaborate together to create a new reality. There is an understanding, first of all, that nation states are important players. Remember what happened at the first day of the corona, when people realized it's a pandemic. States, wherever they are, closed the borders. Even in Europe, the Schengen agreement evaporated in a second. States said, this is us, so we protect us within our borders. This is they are outside our borders. Here we are, and here is the way we act as state. We take responsibility for our citizens because we have to save them. And that wasn't, an exaggeration, because it was about saving people and helping them in, one of the greatest catastrophe we remember probably since World War II. So the state walked in, but then they realized that they should coordinate between themselves, that they need to support each other, that they need to send vaccination to states that cannot afford them, that there is a sense of global responsibility. This, for me, is probably one of the major characteristics of liberal nationalism. Now, think about the new legislation of mega companies. The new legislations now are globally enacted in order not to give any state an advantage and not to allow mega companies to avoid paying tax. But the taxes are going to be paid within the states and going to be used for services for citizens or residents of these states. So there's a global view of how not to exploit the citizens, the workers, the employees in the state system. Bringing job back in. Biden, who I don't think ever defined himself as a social democrat, went around saying, bring the jobs back to America. By the way, in this respect, Trump did show the way. He was talking about jobs and maybe the evaporation of jobs in the global new liberal era as something that was of immense importance. So bring the job back, bring money in, build the infrastructure, build the support system for citizens, is what was typically identified as the characteristic of the nation state who built the services in the 19th century, lost control at the end of the 20th century, and now is coming back. Now, when the state comes back, the question is, what is the state like? I mean, what is America? What is American? What is Israeli? So this is no surprise that this is also when identity struggles are intensified. Because if the state is a major player, then we want to feel that it is ours. And the way to feel that it is ours is to interact with it in the public sphere, not only in the political sphere. So the re-entry of the state as a major player in the social and political arena makes state identity much more important. And therefore, all over the world, we see both governments and opposition fighting about what the state is like, what the state should be like, maybe. And when I told you that, people voted for this government because they looked at Bibi and said, no, we are not like that, it was a question of identity. Who are we as Israelis? Who represents us? Our leaders should in some way represent us, and we want to feel comfortable with them. You look at this elected new Knesset. It's the most diverse Knesset ever. There are, I think, a record number of women, over 30%, which is unprecedented. There are 9 members of the government, 9 ministers, women. When I was in the government, I was sometimes alone, sometimes with another woman. We were 2 at most. This is a major change. There are more Arabs than ever. There is an Arab vice minister in the Prime Minister office. I should share with you a visual understanding of what it means. The Prime Minister sits in what we call the aquarium, which is a big, big office closed by glass doors. This is why it's called the aquarium. Arab members of the parliament never crossed into the aquarium. Now there is a minister sitting on the other side of the door. Just imagine it visually, what it means. It's like looking, I think, at Biden's government and saying, who are the people who are now in, who are sitting around the table, who are making decisions? So it seems like, although we think that identity is something very rooted that cannot be changed, sometimes dramatic situations, and I think the end of the Trump administration, like the end of the Bibi government in Israel, shifts the way people understand who they are. And in these rare moments, something new is created. Now, here is the question for all of us, I think both in the United States and in Israel. You can use this opportunity to bond the different communities, or you can use it to be victorious and suppress the voice of the other community. And I think this is really the great, this is the great sort of test of the ability of these governments, not only to survive, but to change the political reality for the long term. So it means that identity discourse should be extremely well handled within these moments of transition. I think it's very important for Israel not to exclude the people who are not in the government. And I should say both Yair Lapid and Bennett spoke about it. Now let's see that it's really the case in reality. It's a moment to bring people to a listening position that they lost many years ago. I think this is also true in the United States, that bringing Republicans back into some sort of bonding with Democrats, and I think Biden is also thinking about it a lot, bringing people together is a beginning of actually fighting against this process of polarization that was very typical of both societies, and actually is typical of, I think, all around the world, societies are being polarized. Now the question is, once the polarization reached a peak, I think this is a very frightening moment for societies. People say, people looked at the people who raided the Capitol and said, this is not us, this is not America, we need something different. And people looked at what happened, and really the racism and the vulgar way this government behaved, the Bibi government, and said, this is not us. And now, this is a moment to see whether you can really converse across the aisle and create a new, more inclusive identity. And in this respect, I think we should remember that the blame is not for extremism, is not always on the other side. It's very easy to say, you know, it's Bibi, it's Trump. But I think all of us should admit that both in Israel, the United States, and elsewhere, the liberal progressive camp wasn't attentive enough to voices that didn't fit our picture of progress. And what I do in my new book on why nationalism, I claim that this blindness or deafness to claims that were worthy of respect among people who we disagree with or don't identify with, this has become maybe the trigger for anger that at the end of the day worked against us. I think the progressive liberal camp should now refine its listening abilities to voices of those who don't belong, and do not dismiss every voice that you disagree with as populism. I think this is something very dangerous that happened to us. It's too easy, too frequently used when, you know, you look at other people and you say, oh, well, you know, don't listen to them. They are rednecks, they are populists, they are Bibi supporters, they are brutal, they are vulgar, you know, this is all they are. Most of these people are also very often representing something that you have missed. I certainly don't think that 40% of the Israelis are ignorant and they voted to Bibi just because they are unable to evaluate what's good for them. I don't think that 46% of Americans are idiots when they voted for Trump. One should understand the reasoning of people before one dismisses them, because this is the beginning of a conversation. Unless you have this ability to listen and understand the other, not only across national line, you know, a lot of us say, oh, I can easily understand the Palestinians. That's my position since I can remember myself, or since I was an activist very, very early on. But sometimes I find myself unable, so angry about Israeli voice that I disagree with, because this is my voice, right? I'm fighting now for my voice, for how I perceive myself. If they are part of my country, my society, then this is much more difficult for me to understand. And if I know the Hamas is not representing me, I hate and despise what they're saying, it's easier for me to despise them, but then it's easier for me to understand the misery of the people in Gaza or the West Bank. When I despise what people say and when they go to the flag dance and what they say about Arabs, it's not only about them, it's also about me. And it's my responsibility. I've been Minister of Education. I failed. And other people, you know, around the world should say, we failed. And maybe we were not adamant enough about our opinions, about how to educate people, how to educate young people to be more attentive, more tolerant, more liberal. So it's not only about what they are doing wrong. I think it's about what we have maybe done wrong and how we should reconsider what we are doing in order to create, first of all, an inner dialogue and then a cross-community dialogue that will allow us to live together. I think that in Israel, the moment of the formation of this government is also a moment not only for liberals to speak among themselves and think about how they restructure their dialogue. It's also the two other major issues that I think one relates to what Ruby Rivlin calls the fifth tribe, the tribe of Israel and the diaspora, of what is Judaism. We have now a member of parliament. It's true he wasn't able to become a minister, who is member of the reform movement. You know what the Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox think about it. There is a big fight now that should be fought about the role of religion in Israel and what kind of religion do we hold as public religion. Privately, it's a different matter. But when I hear Bennett, an Orthodox Jew, saying, okay, we should change the kashrut line, or we should change marriages, civic marriages, we should think about civic issues, maybe it's the beginning of breaking the lines of disagreement. One should remember, I'm sure Avineri talked about it, that in the formation of the State of Israel, the Zionist Orthodox were actually part of the mainstream, and they collaborated with the founders of the state. The state could have been founded without them. They have moved to a very extreme position, pulled by the Orthodox parties. It's a question, what is going to happen now? If you watched the flag dance yesterday, I don't think there was one secular person in the crowd. So I think this is now a moment that the Orthodox Zionist camp will have to ask itself, and we have to ask ourselves, how do the two come together? I have just recently been in a retreat of heads of schools of education. The only secluded schools of education in Israel are those of the Orthodox. The ultra-Orthodox don't play the game at all, but in my school, there are Orthodox students coming to be trained as teacher in a general school. They sit in separate classes because they don't want to mix, but they meet in the campus, Jews and Arabs, seculars, women, men. They are taught by women. They are coming into the main sort of sector of the population. But the Orthodox Jews are now the one who exclude themselves most dramatically. So that's the state and religion issue, though everybody promised to keep the status quo, is going to be, I think, renegotiated. And I think in this, diaspora Jews has a major role to play, because there is no future for liberal Judaism or progressive Judaism in Israel without the collaboration with diaspora Jews. The second group that is going to renegotiate its position is certainly the Jewish and Arab population, and that's about the role of the Arab minority in Israel. Where do they stand in respect of the Jewish state? And it's tremendously interesting to see that Mansour Abbas knows. I do appreciate him for that, and I wasn't anticipating him to be so smart. After what happened in Ramle and Lud, he went to a synagogue that was burned to show his sympathies and empathy to what happened there. But yesterday in the public, when the government was announced, he spoke very clearly about the Israeli Palestinians and their needs and their aspirations. So there is a voice that is now being heard in a different way in the public arena. And I think Israeli Arab citizens, Israeli Arab Palestinians are in a position to rethink their bonding with the state and to ask themselves. And I ask my Arab friends, and my vice president is an Arab professor from Tira. I have many Arab friends, and I said to them, how did it happen to you that Mansour Abbas, an Orthodox Muslim, has taken over and was so pragmatic, and your liberal camp voted against the government? How did it happen to you? You lost your voice within your own society before you come to renegotiate your position in the Israeli sphere. Go and check what happened to you at home. So I think we're both maybe all of us in a position that, first of all, we have been defeated for many years. Now we are sort of re-emerging. So there's a sense of optimism that allows you to think about the future, but there are lessons to be learned from what has happened. We're all very vulnerable. This government could disappear in a few months and we will be back where we were. I think in America, it's different because your system allows a president to be there for the whole 4 years. So you have a little bit more time to establish a new position within the United States and across the world. But nothing is for sure. And things that have evolved in recent years do not disappear in a second. They are there. They will erupt again and again and again. The question is, do we now have the power to give a new answer to an old question and to reconnect and create a new kind of identity, both to America and Israel, in order to make ourselves what I think is the ideal position of being a liberal and a Democrat and a nationalist, in the sense that I'm here because I care about Israel. I love Israel. I probably die here. I've lived here most of my life, except for some years of studying and teaching abroad. I want my children to be here. Luckily, they are here. I want my grandchildren to be here. So I'm here because I have a very strong commitment to Israel. And I think the people in the United States who acted against Trump have very strong commitment to what the United States is like. It's not that one side is a patriot and the other one isn't. So we're all motivated by this sense of belonging. But I think now it's the time to think how we express our belonging and how we try to reshape our societies. And I think both communities are involved in this struggle, what it is to be American, what it is to be Israelis. And I think it's time for activism for those who believe that they can influence the way the future is going to evolve. So I make no promises. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe if this lecture was in another 2 weeks, I would be more pessimistic. But I allow myself to be optimistic now for the next 2 weeks. I've been a pessimist for too long, so I need some air and some optimism. So thank you for listening, and I will be delighted to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Yuli, for your remarks. Just a reminder, I know a number of you have already done so, but if you'd like to ask a question, please submit it to the Q&A box. And Professor Tamir and I are going to have a conversation for 15 minutes or so, and then we'll move to the questions from the broader audience. So let's begin by talking about something you know a lot about, and which you spoke about at some length, which is liberal nationalism. My question is, between 1993, when you wrote your book, Liberal Nationalism, and 2019, Why Nationalism, something dramatic changed. In a certain sense, liberal nationalism went off the rails, or we might say nationalism went off the rails. And you've mentioned at various points in time the impact of globalization, which, of course, towards the end of the 20th century and at the beginning of the 21st century, really became a very powerful force. So what is if you could chart for us what occurred in that quarter century between your books that changed both the complexion of liberal nationalism and maybe your understanding of the phenomenon. What actually happened in that enormously consequential period?
It's very interesting. When I finished my dissertation just before the fall of the former Soviet Union, and while writing my dissertation, everybody said to me, "Why are you writing about nationalism? This is, nobody's interested in nationalism." Actually, I published my book at Princeton because I gave it to Oxford University Press just before the event in Eastern Europe, and they all said, "Well, nationalism it's not a really interesting issue anymore in Western Europe." And then the Soviet Union fell, and nationalism erupted in all the states that were freed from the Soviet Union and also across the world. But then, and we see an oscillation, right? So there was a wave of from 45, let's say, from the end of the world, nationalism was, the reputation of nationalism was so terrible, nobody wanted to say anything good about nationalism. Even though in these years, nationalism was used to create national health service, national pensions, national schooling, and so on. But it was like, obliterated from the vocabulary, don't say nationalism. Then after the collapse of the former Soviet Union, a lot of people started to say about, okay, what do we do with all these, territories? And obviously the answer was, well, those nations have a right for self-determination. And we saw an eruption of new states in Eastern Europe, according to very traditional line of national self-determination. Then, after this wave, the emergence of globalism and neoliberalism, I think, weakened state all over the world and created a resentment to state. It was all about the thin state that does not intervene. It was about non-intervention, free market. These are very rough lines, but I can't take the whole hour to answer this. But that was the ruling assumption. It was all about, individuals having opportunity in the global world. And what has happened, I think, actually since the beginning of maybe 2008, maybe a little bit earlier, is that things that have started to occur in the 80s, but we didn't see, became very obvious. Certain classes in the Western world were left behind to the extent that they felt alienation and anger, and they became larger and larger and more excluded economically and politically. And this is the voice that erupted now. It was far more, it was not an identity based on color, race, or ethnicity. It was an identity based in many, many ways on exclusion, on social economical positioning, on issues of status within the societies. And I think these are the voices that brought Trump, that played a role in Eastern Europe, in many of the countries, and also in Israel. But I think this has went so far that we're oscillating a little bit back now. And the question is, how far will we oscillate back? So at the end of the day, I don't think that we ever have a global world or a national world. We're always in between, but we move between the poles. And I think that now the very brutal nationalism that took over is sort of bouncing back in many places around the world. And we are seeing sort of a combination of social democracy, soft nationalism, welfarism, ecological sort of the emergence of ecological concern, partly national, partly global. So it's a mixture. If I think that what we're seeing, and I don't know if I can share my screen, but maybe I can. It's a mixture of different political ideologies that are bringing us together. And I think in this sense, also this awkward coalition that we see around the world is an outcome of this situation. This is not a total coincidence that we now see what one can call awkward coalitions around the world, because we see people that come from different side of the political map. It happens in Denmark, it happens in Israel, it happens in Austria, it happens, by the way, in New Zealand, it happens in Australia. People, very different coalitions that what we have witnessed before are coming together to make a difference. So I think it's the spirit of this age that makes us less identified as right or left, less locked within our positions, but maybe more open to other alternatives that may be that are emerging. And I don't know if can I share my screen? Yep. And it brings together the environment, the well-being, and questions of immigration. And when I see Kamala Harris going to negotiate how to stop immigration, I understand that no one will go to the sort of naive globalist view anymore. People understand what immigration means, so they're going to be more national on immigration. They're going to be more aware of environmental, and they are much more aware of the need of welfareism. So that's a new combination that is taking over.
Right. So in the mix that you mentioned of social welfare and environmental consciousness, We also have to add, of course, majoritarianism, a view of democracy that emerged and was really promoted by a number of charismatic political leaders that basically said the majority gets to decide. And that seems to refract the prism in very important and troubling ways, because while you see the possibility for these new voices to emerge, in fact, majoritarianism has very often led to serious erosion of some of the foundations of democracy in a good number of countries around the world. So, what is the way to move beyond that version of democracy that emerged over the last couple of decades, which what Viktor Orban calls illiberal democracy, proudly calls illiberal democracy, which is really reflected in a kind of majoritarian regard for the well-being of the majority and concomitant disregard for the interests of minorities, as well as for the standard rules of the democratic game. One of the things we see in the United States, or one of the things that many of us fear, is that one of the teams no longer plays by the rules of the democratic game. And when that happens, as scholars of democracy have told us, it's a very serious problem. So a common thread of leaders like Orban and Netanyahu and Trump is playing into that majoritarian understanding of democracy, calling it democracy. And yet you caution us against sort of castigating the other side, that, liberals and progressives need to take ownership for what responsibility they have. How can we do that? How can that be done in the age of illiberal democracy, majoritarianism?
Well, I think the two different issues here. One is majoritarianism or illiberal democracies. Every ideology could be taken to an illiberal pole. And that can happen to democracy, to socialism, to nationalism, to whatever. I think it is quite clear that for many years we have been talking about the eroding trust in democracy, but we didn't take ourselves very seriously when we talked about it. We should have known better that if there is an erosion of trust in governments, in courts, in the balance of powers, then some people feel that democracy didn't serve them well. And that's where the listening comes in. I think it is very easy for us when we talk about minority to say that if you're losing all the time, there needs to be a remedy. One reason we think about for minority rights is that you can't be always the loser. You have to protect people who are positioned in a minority. But what happens if people who belong to the majority become permanent losers? I think the most interesting case actually is one of Germany. When you look at East Germany versus West Germany, most of the right wing, not all, but most of the right wing emergence is in East Germany. And when you talk to people in East Germany and listen to them, you see how the unification left them aside, even though Angela Merkel comes from the East and everybody says, well, the East is in government for 16 years. That's not their feeling. They feel excluded. They feel hopeless. And when democracy fails to give hope, and that's, I think, partly due to neoliberalism and individualism and the avoidance of discussions of class and well-being in liberal democracies, people just feel the state doesn't serve them anymore, and they rebel. So whether you like their rebellion or not, and we should see who are, for me, and maybe you disagree, but for me, it doesn't ring true to say that urban people are more, by nature, more democratic than rural people. I don't know. I think human nature is if there is something global, it's human nature. So, and this is why democracy, works, because we believe that people have a judgment that we should value always. So what happened to these people? Why they were left aside? Why they were left desperate? This is something we have to take accountable for, and we should give an answer for ourselves. Because if the state doesn't serve a group, and you have third generation of poverty, if you have third generation of people who are hopeless, then you know something has gone wrong. You know, when I was a child, my mother really liked musicals, and we lived for many years abroad, and her favorite musical, and the first one I've seen was Oklahoma. I don't know if you remember them, but I know all the songs by heart, right? So, like, I don't know, last vacation I went with my children and grandchildren, and we always watch a movie, and I said, let's watch Oklahoma. So we watched Oklahoma. They also know how to sing the song. We were very happy. And when the evening ended, I said to them, gosh, you know, all this has vanished. You know, this pride in the land and thinking, you know, that they are feeding the United. I suddenly had a sociological understanding of Oklahoma that was sort of, okay, what people feel when that's vanished. This pride is vanished. They have nothing that works for them. That's what I want to listen to. And I think if we listen to that, the people will trust our attempt to represent them better. And therefore, they may trust democracy more.
There's a higher degree of difficulty in doing that, given the social media landscape that we inhabit, you know, which fragments and compartmentalizes and segments and creates echo chambers that are very hard to escape. So I'm wondering how you think we can crawl out of those silos to create that posture of listening and hearing and talking. And really, ultimately, what you're talking about is rediscovering a meaningful notion of the common weal.
It's a very difficult question. I don't think I have an answer for that. I think this is really, I mean, not only we are separated physically, we're also geographically, we're also separated consciously. So we have a different, you know, our national consciousness is now sort of that has different tracks. And we all see, even, you know, Facebook and Google, you know, puts on your computer whatever they know you would like to see, and you're just channeled more and more into a corner. I don't know. You know, schooling. One thing that we all forgot about was once a good way to create a common good. No longer, but I think this is really one of the biggest challenges of our century.
So you had a crack at it for 3 years as Minister of Education, and you told us that you failed.
Yep.
How? Why?
Well, I didn't fail in everything, but I did fail in this because, you know, the two things that I did in this respect were a failure. One is that I changed the curricula on coexistence between Jews and Arab and prepare a very large, comprehensive plan for living together, which was deleted the moment I left the office by Gideon Sa'ar. And there I had really high hopes that it will change, and I doubled the time that we teach civics, and I really wanted it to be part of the curricula. It was like vanishing. Now, by the way, everybody says bring it back, because after what happened during the last few weeks between Jews and Arabs, people are more aware of the need. And I obviously couldn't change the mind of the ultra-Orthodox to be part of the system. I managed to give girls in the ultra-Orthodox community quite a lot of freedom to study more than they did, partly because I didn't insist on mixed classes, and it was very controversial, but I said better study than remain ignorant, even if it's separated, which is my position even today. But the attempt to negotiate a new understanding of what education should be like for ultra-Orthodox boys was a total failure.
Because you didn't listen as you counsel us to do, or for some other reason?
I think that the reason it failed, first of all, it was for a political constellation, right? This is not only up to political or social conversation. But I think what happens in Israel with the ultra-Orthodox community, and even with the Orthodox community, is that we feel they are oppressing us, but they feel we are oppressing them. And there's a sort of this terrible balance of fear. And people will tell me, 2 days ago, when I was in this retreat, I speak with an Orthodox rabbi who heads a teacher's college. And I said, why can't we study together? Why can't my student come to you and your student? And he says, no. What will happen then if they will meet Arabs and they will be intermarriage? And I said, what? Do you think if your students will come for a week to Beit Berel, they're going to intermarry? I mean, don't you trust your students even a little bit? And the real answer is no. And I think as long as they feel a total distrust, it's not only Israel, it's the modern world, it's the temptation of the modern world, then they artificially close themselves. I understand their fear. I totally understand what they say, but I can't convince them that, the spread is not as, intensive as they think it is. So.
Well, thank you for your candor and introspecting about that. I wonder how you assess what I think of as the long Netanyahu decade that lasted from 2009 to 2021. What happened to Israel during that period, and what's your measure of Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership during that time?
It's a difficult question. First of all, I know Netanyahu quite well from the time we were both in parliament. I think he has gone through a major change. He wasn't like that in the beginning. I had many conversations with him. He was much more pragmatic. Netanyahu basically is a pragmatic guy. And I'm sort of discounting the last 2 years where he was totally obsessed with himself and his position. So here are the good things I have to say about Netanyahu. He didn't lead us to a major war, no matter what. His rhetoric and his actions are very different. He didn't annex the territories. He actually didn't build as much as he could have. He supported the economy in a quite efficient way. And he, in the last 2 years, destroyed all the good things he has done by Trumpism, by really using fear and hatred as a political tool. And within that, then he did a peace with the, Arab countries in order to prove that you can do peace without dealing with the Palestinians. So it's my judgment is very mixed. And I think he's an extremely smart person. He's the shrewdest politician around, right? This is why he's so dangerous. But in the last 2 years, since his trial started and the investigation started, he's lost it. And he's lost it in a dangerous way because he has such a lot of influences, because he's very liked adored by many people.
And what about the foundations of democracy over the last decade? Do you feel they have been significantly eroded? They remain strong?
They have been eroded since the trial. When he would try to go against the Supreme Court, against the Justice Department, against the police, all the people by the way he nominated all these guys, right? We also they were disaster, but then the role made them more maybe more careful, and then he went against them. That's, I think, the biggest damage. It's the last since the investigations, it became a personal crusade and totally irrelevant to anything else, and that was the dangerous moment.
So I'm going to ask one final question for now, and then we'll open up to the questions from the audience. What is your measure of Naftali Bennett, Yair Lapid, and Mansour Abbas?
Well, there are three very different people. Mansour Abbas came out as very shrewd. He anticipated things. Yesterday, there was a party of the Labour Party, something that didn't happen for a long, long time. So I went with an old friend, was an expert on Israeli politics, and he said to me, if you would ask me if Mansour Abbas will be the first vice minister in the prime minister office, I would say no way. He turned out to be very, very smart, and he played it perfectly. I don't think he made a mistake. This was really surprising. One should remember, like 4 months ago, he was not going to pass the threshold, right? He was going to stay out of parliament. Yael Lapid, on the other hand, worked on it diligently for a long time. And I didn't have a high appreciation of his political work. I now think he did a very good job, gave up the position of being number one, and created this alliance, which is really outstanding. Naftali Bennett is the person I least appreciate. Don't tell anyone. I hope nobody is listening. This is a consequential situation. This was the situation. He was the guy who got the card that could trump the game, and he just did it. Now the question is, will he grow into this position? Will he manage to do an inner process that will make him a leader, and that will make him a leader of a reconciliatory government? It's not his nature. It's not what he did in the last few years. Many years ago, I heard a wonderful lecture by Professor Kahn about the reasons for Israel's success in the War of Independence. And when he finished this very brilliant talk, and I was utterly convinced that he was right, he said, if Israel would have failed the 48 war, I would say the same things. And I can say the same thing about Naftali Bennett. He could have been just as much part of the Netanyahu government, and we would all say it's because of Bennett that we are doomed. And now we are saying because of Bennett, we are saved. I don't think the man has changed. I think the circumstances has changed. And now let's see whether it grows into the circumstances.
Very interesting moment. New. Very interesting moment to see if he will rise to the occasion.
Very, very interesting.
We have a question from a listener from India who says, my country obtained freedom through nationalism, but now Democrats are fearful of the rise of religious nationalism. I'm thinking of the BJP and Prime Minister Modi, I think. How can we check this? How can we put a check on this, on the rise of a kind of exclusionary religious nationalism?
I think actually in India, like everywhere else, there is a struggle between religious nationalism and constitutional nationalism. As far as I know, and your listener can correct me, the people who rebel against Modi go with the Indian flag and the Indian constitution. And they fight like people who like Life Matters or the Black flags in Israel. They don't say we are not Israelis or we're not a nationalist. They say because we care about India, we want it to be a constitutional democracy based on unity, and they raise the Indian flag rather than the flag of Modi's party, which is actually sectarian. So I don't think it's liberal. It's a nationalism against globalism or whatever. There are two types of nationalism fighting themselves for power and for dominance in India, as they do in Israel, as they do elsewhere.
And would you say you're confident about the capacity of liberal nationalism to triumph, or you simply believe it is the more suitable and appropriate?
Well, I certainly feel it's more suitable and appropriate. As I said, I believe we're oscillating, and every time we cross the line, we bounce back. The question is how far we cross the line. And we crossed the line once or more than once in the national side. We also crossed the line in the neoliberal side. So that's how dangerous. We never know that we crossed the line until we've gone too far.
Okay. So one questioner sort of follows up on your call for more listening and sort of comes at the question from a centrist approach. The question is, what can centrist Israelis do to protect themselves in the future from political pressure and even extortion from interest groups? Here thinking of the Haredim on one hand and Arab parties on the other. So how can one sort of forge that centrist position? And is it essential to do business with, as President Rivlin would call it, the other tribes in order to create that common political identity?
Well, I think constitutional proportional democracies calls for coalition, and that always gives the minority power because it's the last guy who joins the crowd that makes the difference. That what happened to Naftali Bennett, and usually it was the ultra-Orthodox party, and now for once it's an Arab party. Our system maybe allows coalition. So in this very unique coalition, creates an opportunity to collaborate across camps. Usually it gives a lot of power to the small minority. But I hope that this government now will change the terms of negotiations. And for example, I think the first thing Naftali Bennett said, and this is coming from an Orthodox Jew, that let's release the Arabs from service from age 21. Something that no government managed to do when the Orthodox parties were in the government, just because they thought that would keep their control over young Haredi men. So some of the changes that may happen now may allow the Haredi community to integrate better in Israel. And I think there is a deep understanding on both right and left, by the way. And this is something you should say, everybody. Bibi was full of incitement against the Arabs, but there was no government who invested in the Arab community as much as he did, because we understand that we, secular Jews, are going to soon be the minority. And we can't carry the burden of the state on our shoulders, so we need to align ourselves economically with both the ultra-Orthodox and the Arabs. So if that understanding will sink in, and ultra-Orthodox maybe will get less state support and will be more interested in collaborating and engaging in the market, then maybe there will be a beginning of a change.
That's a stunning contrast that you point out, that Netanyahu used his significant rhetorical powers to electoral advantage at the expense of the Arab population, and yet undertook actions, particularly 922 comes to mind, that infused billions of shekels into the Arab sector to benefit that community. So that, in a certain sense, encapsulates some of the tensions and contradictions of Bibi Netanyahu. A number of questioners ask about sort of the system itself, the Knesset, and a Knesset coalition of 61, and the fragmentation that exists within it. And the question is, how representative really is it? How possible is it to forge that kind of common sense of well-being that you, as a political theorist, spend a lot of time thinking about? Is the system itself in need of reform?
What was the percentage that Biden got in the election?
51, 52.
That's a 60. That is now 61. That's elections. At the end of the day, even a minute difference makes a difference, a big difference. Now, really, the question is: don't forget that on the other side of the map, in America, there were 48% that didn't vote for Biden. In Israel, there are 60 members of parliament that didn't vote for this government. This is when I said listen to them, is that they haven't disappeared. And the fragility of this situation maybe makes you a better listener. Mm-hmm. Don't think in America things are different. Biden is as fragile as this government.
Yeah, and we are acutely aware of that here. And that brings us to a number of questions about the United States. And what changes do you expect on the part of the new government in Israel towards the U.S. administration, and perhaps even to American Jews, given what former Ambassador Ron Dermer had to say about American Jews and evangelicals a few weeks ago? And what changes do you expect on the part of the Biden administration towards Israel and the Israel-Palestinian conflict?
You know, the difference between the two governments is the amount of time it took Biden to call Netanyahu and the amount of time it took Biden to call Bennett, like 10 minutes, and comparison to what I think 10 days. So I think this administration is delighted to see a new government. Certainly Bibi wasn't their choice. And this government is going to collaborate with the United States. Don't forget, Bennett is semi-American. And no matter what it says, he sees himself as an American in a way. And, he has this respect certainly for Biden and for the American administration. I don't think it's going to be rude and aggressive as Bibi was. I think Biden should be very careful not to push this government to decisions it can't take. So this administration, I'm sure, is aware that, this is no time to push. And that wasn't my traditional position, was push as hard as you can, but not now. Because a little bit of, if you lose the balance, then this government will fall and Netanyahu will come in again. It's not yet over, like Trump is not yet over. So I think, being cautious. On the other hand, I think this government will not object and will probably support improving the life conditions of Palestinians in the West Bank and especially in Gaza, because the situation in Gaza is terrible. And it became, this is really Gaza became the big, I think, it has a big influence on the way Israel sees the future solution with the Palestinians, because people say, what if we give back the West Bank to the Palestinians, it will become Gaza? Because I don't think the Hamas is anyone's favorite. So in this respect, I think saving Gaza from itself, I know it sounds very paternalistic, but I don't know any other way of putting it, has a lot of importance.
So do you think that small steps can be taken to ameliorate conditions in the West Bank and Gaza, rather than, big steps that will change the political calculus in a meaningful way? I guess my question is, how much of a horizon do we have before things implode again? Is there not tremendous pressure to bring meaningful change to Palestinians? Whose long deferred aspirations for self-determination are, boil over?
Well, first of all, I'm sure Netanyahu and his supporters will try to push every, button they have in order to create an explosion. So there will be explosions, but you have to try and manage them rather than intensify them. I think we should be realistic. There will be, even if there could be a two-state solution, it won't happen right now. So it's about managing the conflict rather than solving it, and creating as many improvements as you can under these circumstances. And maybe in due time, I think both Bennett and Lapid are open to be influenced by the United States and Europe. But they can't go too far because they lose their government. So it's this delicate play between improving the situation in the West Bank and Gaza and allowing some sort of, respect to what this government has to preserve as part of its status quo.
Right. One careful listener caught your statement that Jews will become the minority.
Secular Jews.
Pardon me?
Secular Jews.
Secular Jews. Okay.
I.e. me.
And asked, if that's the case, how can common ground be found?
Well, the common ground won't be a secular state. It will be, don't forget that probably 40%, if not 60% of the Palestinian citizens of Israel are not secular. In my college, everybody covers their hair. Sort of, probably one of the most secular persons around, right? There are religious Jews, there are religious Arabs, there are religious Christians, there are everyone. Religion is a player in the Middle East, and it's not going to go away. So Israel will not be a secular state. It can be a reasonably, I don't know how to put it, a reasonably balanced religious state. But the interesting thing, maybe the most interesting now coming out of this coalition, is that it serves the interests of both Jews and Arabs. there's strange coalitions coming, coming out of what Jews and religious Jews are, the common conservatism of religious Jews and religious art is going to emerge. It's not going to be easy for us, but I am realistic about it.
Right. I was going to ask, is that a state in which you would like to live?
Well, I'll probably die here. I don't know what my children will choose. It will be more conservative, but sometimes when I look at other, at the United States, and I say on the average, not on the polls, but on the average, when you see I don't think religiosity is disappearing from the world like nationalism. It's coming back both in Europe and maybe I don't know enough about religiosity in the United States, but I think it's not as rare as people tend to think.
So one questioner asked you, as a scholar of nationalism, what do you think of the nation-state law? What do you think that passed in the summer of 2018? And what do you think its fate will be in a new government and perhaps a government to succeed this government?
In Israel or generally?
The nation-state law in Israel, yeah.
The nation-state law, sorry, I didn't.
Chok Halom.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think the solution would be not abolishing this law, but adding a law that preserves the democracy in Israel. Because the national law, which was a totally unnecessary law and sort of irrelevant to anything else but serving Bibi's purpose, will not be abolished in a Bennett and Saar government. But I think that the demand that an clause in the law or a separate law on Israel as a democracy is an equal egalitarian democracy will be added, and that will balance itself out. Both are unnecessary because we have all of this in the Declaration of Independence. But once you do one thing unnecessary, then you do another.
Do you think something should be done to enshrine even further the Declaration of Independence, as Tzipi Livni, amongst others, have suggested?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, but it's a culture, not the law, that matters. At the end of the day, you can always undo laws and legislations, as Roe versus Wade or whatever. You think it's going to be there forever? No. I always used to say to Bibi when we had these debates on the parliament, it says, we're going to legislate that Israel will be forever democratic. And I would say, well, Bibi, you're smart enough to understand that no law can sustain itself forever, especially if the demography changed, then whatever you legislate will change. So, it's nice to make it a law. But...
So as we move towards conclusion, we have a few questions that I'll put to you. Professor Myron Aronoff says that in his book, Israel Visions and Divisions from 1989, he traced the early polarization that we see in the present moment to Menachem Begin's manipulation of political culture, ethnic and religious divisions. Netanyahu exploited and exaggerated these divisions. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that Begin was the first one to draw on the inner conflicts of the Israeli society in order to polarize them, and very successfully so. But Bibi has made it an art. So but I agree that this is the beginning.
I wonder, in light of your work on liberal nationalism, how you assess Begin, and for that matter, his mentor Jabotinsky, with whom you had some issues, I think, as Minister of Education. Maybe we can discuss that. But at one level, they're strong ethno-nationalists, and yet there are also liberal nationalist sensibilities in both of them. Especially with regard to pliant ethnic minorities who should be accorded rights of citizenship and even some measure of group rights. Do Begin and Jabotinsky register on your scale of liberal nationalism?
Jabotinsky certainly does. By the way, I had no issue with him. It was like a false accusation.
That's right.
That made my mom very sad because she admired his poetry translations. So no, I didn't touch Jabotinsky in the curricula. But Begin moved Begin went one step further. It's always the difference between being a theoretician and being a politician. So Begin took it one step further, I think more to the nationalist side than Jabotinsky, and certainly Bibi took it two steps further. So there are certainly liberal roots in Jabotinsky's thinking, very deep. There are liberal roots, especially respect for law and the balance of powers in Begin's tradition. And Bibi had it in the beginning and then lost it. And I think this is really a tragedy, because not only he really sort of hurt the spirit of the nation, he lost it because of a personal reason, and he really convinced himself that he is persecuted, and that was like a total transition of a man that was fairly rational and successful into an irrational politician that made a lot of damage.
Okay, we'll have a couple final questions, and alas, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. There are many questions, and a number of speakers wanted to commend you on a brilliant lecture and express their appreciation to you. What's your sense of the new president of the State of Israel?
Oh, I like him a lot. He's a personal friend. I think he's great, and now we have a royal family, so which is certainly a great choice, and I'm very happy he was elected, and I think he will do a great job, especially on this relationship between Israel and the diaspora, and learning how to live, I think, in a diverse society. I think he would be good. And I should say, Rivlin was a great surprise and a great president. He was really, his Israeli hope, something we cherish in Beit Berel and try to preserve even after he leaves his position, and really fight for it, because I think that the Israeli hope culture that he's installed in the president's house, which was in total contradiction to what Bibi did, was something that saved us. And I'm really grateful to Ruby Rivlin. I think he's great, and I think we should all try to preserve his heritage.
Yeah. So the final question really brings us back to something we talked about at the beginning, which is really what's in the toolkit of the liberal nationalist to prevent the deterioration that can lead to discrimination, chauvinism, or even fascism. What are the most effective ways of resisting that deterioration? You've mentioned education. What about governmental barriers, regulations, separation of power? And how successful has Israel been to date in adopting such measures? What more can be done?
I think the thing that should be done now is really regain the trust of citizens. This is not only for Israel. Regain the trust of Israel in political dialogue, in political procedures, and in democracy. And this is a work to be done in all modern democracies, because there is a great need to convince people, first of all, that those who are in government take care of your interests, even if they're not your representative. Bennett said it very beautifully when he was elected. He said, I'm going to serve all of you. And if the state will manage to allow people to feel that it serves all of them, that's the best remedy. I'm less enthusiastic, as you probably understood, about legislation. I'm more enthusiastic about education, about working together, about creating opportunities for people to feel that this government and this country is for them. I think the corona made something fantastic, and this is, by the way, credit to Bibi, big credit to Bibi. People being vaccinated sat there and said, wow, I got it from my government. I'm protected because of my government. Everybody assumed it would change the picture of the election, and if Bibi wouldn't have freaked out, or, it was a very narrow margin, I don't forget it, that would have done a lot of difference to a lot of people. So feeling that your country protects you is something very important. And it's something that we should remind ourselves was the initial purpose of the state. It's not about liberalism or nationalism, it's about statism. That's what states are about. And I think if states will replay their responsibility and make it very obvious to people that they care for them, a trust will be built, and from trust we can build on to a higher level of collaboration.
Right. One of the ironies and paradoxes of the Corona era is that it reasserted the significance of the state, and as I understood you, may even allow for a kind of bottom-up globalism where states not only take care of their own, but take care of their neighbors across the border, as opposed to the top-down globalization that I think you see as a real threat.
And you see what happened, like with vaccination. First, you vaccinate your people. Then you say, okay, we've done it. Let's collaborate with other states. So there is this balance between thinking about your own and thinking about others. And I think hopefully that's where we're going.
Well, in this moment of opportunity and confusion, it is great that we have had as a guide to the perplexed Professor Yael Tamir, who brings both tremendous theoretical sophistication and also a great deal of practical wisdom born of her years of experience in government. It's really been a pleasure to have you here with us, and we thank you for making time out of your busy schedule, and look forward to further conversations with you.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.